So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, it's always important make mentioning of Yod He Vav He as then the Savior, because truly He is, and He was, and He always shall be the Savior of this time and this season of time. So then, when we read sections of Daniel the 11th chapter, we understand then what Daniel and his contemporary Ezekiel were explaining as far as this tabernacling and also trade. Now, the trade itself gives us many aspects during this time of high knowledge of trade. The trade that we are experiencing during our times via computer is then the very fact that Daniel on the 12th chapter explained the knowledge shalt increase. So then, as far as what's going on in South China Sea and also the joining up of the Chinese and the Soviets at the moment, these truly gives us a prelude what's coming in the near future. Now, there is obviously in the future a second transition that should take place during this time of the restoration period. The first transition, as we can understand very precisely, was then on 2008-2009 at the end of the 1,000 years of deceit. This means while the New World Order was active, gives us first the evidence of a new computerized system taking place, and also, as was unusual previously, a virtual monetary system or systems, so then people can have a chance of going around central banks. That's the main factor for the later government control of taxes, but not through brute force in imposing or policing people doing trade via internet, mostly because of the traders of the earth or the merchants of the earth. We then find them becoming the very leaders of this time. And then later on, then when we read Galah or Revelation, you find then the merchants of the earth. Very seldom you find then countries or kingdoms. You find most often the traders or the merchants of the earth. So we are during the time of the first transition ever since the ending of the 1,000 years of deceit. There is obviously a Chinese system coming up in the form of, for instance, Alibaba. You find then it's the largest internet trade in the world via internet. And similarly, when the Chinese are ready for it, the transformation or then the reversing from USD, our money, into theirs is simply a click away, so they can start doing trade directly in the system. So it's a situation that is very dangerous, because inconspicuously China is doing its work in the space. There are lots of equipment being sent out into space disguised as agricultural, or then weather, or television, or TV, or cable, and they are covering many sections of the skies of the Pacific. So then later on, when the system becomes ready for the world, then the transition, the second transition, then takes place. Now the first, then, as we understand, is the trade via internet. The second is simply then the freighters making the forward motion, because they are providing taxes, yet a lot of the trade done in internet, taxes are not deducted. That's why China is very heavy-handed when it comes to systems, and then virtual systems, monetary systems. They are very freaky regarding this, but because they have a great reason for it. So while then China and the Soviet Union, they are practicing maneuvers in the South China Sea, we find then during this time of elections, China truly is pushing forward their system. Now there is obviously a frontier left from the entire modern system, and there is the area of rare materials. These must be yet situated. Not only we find ourselves awaiting for the completion of the first transition, but when it comes, then the freighters of the earth must bring then the precision of their tracking system into the government's data system, so then they can track those packages and charge then the proper taxes. It's the only way of doing it. There is no other way. So then, reading from the Holy Instructions in Daniel chapter 11, you find then there is a system, there is rejected, but truly in Hebrew, when you read the word rejection, does not mean truly what in the translation is stating as despised. It's because the system was weakened. So because of the weakening of the system, then later on you find in the roughly in the center of the 11th chapter, you find then later the system becomes strengthened. And there is only a reason for it, and there is the control of the rare materials market, organizing as the United States did after the Great Second World War regarding then the trade of petroleum. The situation is very similar, but then provides us with more information and more leverage to work our economy, so then our system can become recuperated from these times of crisis. So then later on I'm going to evaluate more of this situation, because not only we are talking of tabernacling, also trade, and also the military powers later on playing a very important role, as we then later shall to discover the importance of Europe regarding then the prostitute displayed at the Revelation. On the pages of Revelation you find that then the West must be concerned with its economy, then it recuperates, and there is a period of time of the first transition we are waiting for, and then is a second transition, and then during this period of time we find in the third temple being lined up and then tabernacling. In Ethiopia, you find then in Yeshayahu chapter 1:8, where it was known then back many centuries ago as Beit Israel. You read then sections of these, and when we understand Yom Kippur or the Autumn Feast, then we can start layering these situations together. Not to make them work. It's simply reading from the Holy Instructions and understand the natural layering of these events, and then synchronizing them as per then Ezekiel the first chapter. So I want to evaluate these more in a later time, so please stay tuned, much more coming up.